Om Satyena Labhyastapassahe Sa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayohi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self, existing in all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, moderation, austerity, and veracity, all of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it naturally, existing everywhere and in everything, even here in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We welcome everyone here in the ashram and also in our live streaming audience to our morning satsang. We are stationed here at present in the Hawaii ashram. SRV has its other ashrams in San Francisco and in Portland, Oregon. And we rotate and shift around between the three of those and give teachings from those platforms. And those consist of classes in Jnana Yoga that also, of course, include Bhakti Yoga and Dhyan Yoga meditation, which we just accomplished this morning, and Karma Yoga, how to serve. And then we also have these morning satsangs that we try and live stream and record for posterity, as they say, for beings that are looking forward to meditating upon the various conjunctions of life and various happenings and occurrences, and trying to make some deep meaning out of their lives. And in that regard, the Vedanta steps forward to help them, and as do all the beautiful darshanas of India, like yoga and tantra and samkhya. These philosophies, conjoined with religion, with a capital R, as Swami Vivekananda wanted to see it, are the stuff of spiritual life, and that's what we gather in satsang to talk about. So I invite anyone watching on the live streaming this morning to send in a few questions over the chat mechanism, and we have a few here that we didn't get to last week that were written down from students who are on the West Coast and also in Europe, as far away as that. And these live streaming platform helps bring us all together in one location and one time, so that we can engage in Atma Vichara, or the inquiry into the nature of reality. And there are many questions that come up in regard to reality and relativity both. There's a two or a duality side to everything, and we try and bring those together. It's a conjunction, it's called, or a samhita. We bring it together and render the internal and the external into one indivisible state of awareness, under which we can inspect everything that is of a multifarious nature, so that we don't fall into chaos, or our mind just doesn't fall into confusion. We can always remain balanced, which is what we're all striving for. That word in Sanskrit is called sattva, or peaceful balance, harmony. And we want to try and hold that state of harmony in our mind always. And at first, in the practice phase, we're trying to hold it together for as long as we can. any given day or hour or meditation period, or even over longer cycles, try and achieve that balance and maintain it, then you have a chance to be in yoga, as Patanjali, the father of yoga, describes it, as to this oneness or this not two-ness, sometimes the non-dualists call it, where soul and nature, God and mankind, creature and creator, all of those are not seen as two or experienced as two, but have that ground, that homogeneous ground of non-separation. The yoga of non-separation, as Krishna calls it in the Bhagavad Gita. So when divisions happen, and they will, and it's the nature of some of the questions here, that's why I'm bringing it up in this fashion this morning, they happen only in nature, outside of this state of oneness that we always try and maintain. One mind, one heart, one soul, even one body. Then we have to deal with them from that rational, practical, and hopefully wisdom-infused level of consciousness and awareness. And therefore, coming to the atmosphere of Guru, Dharma, and Sangha, that is a spiritual teacher, a group of people who gather around and form what we would call in Hawaii a hui, or a family, a Sangha in Sanskrit, and take the teachings of the Dharma. Those are the three great bodies, and those also are a kind of conjunction or samhita that we look for. I'm speaking in terms of Mahasamhitas because of my study of the Taittiriya Upanishad recently, getting ready to teach that scripture up in our ashrams in Portland and San Francisco, and always looking for the conjoining, the conjunction of things. Is a nice way of thinking of it, especially when we're talking all the time about meditating on fives, sets of fives, or the quintuplication process. Another way of looking at that is joining. Sadhana is connection, and dissolution of the mind is just oneness or natural homogeneity of all things, the natural homogeneous nature of the spirit, the nectar of non-dual truth, sometimes we call it. So with all of that as a sort of introduction, we can get to the questions. Having set that ground, this question first comes in from West Coast. One student says, suppose the dharmic householder earnestly and sincerely maintains the attitude that all of his material security is truly provided for by God, rather than by specific works that are performed. In this case, is there any real difference between their faith and renunciation and that of a monastic who sits in meditation and is sustained materially without even begging for food? Perhaps the answer to that question lies in the very last sentence, that is, that the monk sits in meditation and is sustained materially without even begging for food. Our tradition says in different scriptures that a person who does not partake of food becomes a non-entity. Food is very foundational to spiritual life, at least on this realm of existence where we maintain the annamaya kosha, the sheath of food. That's the body. It's sustained by food, and it lives by food. It becomes food for others when it passes. Fire will consume it, or insects will consume it. Whatever the case may be, it's all based in food. So we must know then, probably to clarify, and it points to the answer to this question, is that the monk too will have to go out begging, unless it's provided for by the monastery. I remember Shisharda Devi, when she was in the body, and Sri Ramakrishna, her divine consort, had passed already, and she noticed that his disciples, his direct disciples, known as the 16 direct disciples of Ramakrishna now, from Vivekananda and Brahmananda on through, Yogananda, Premananda, and others. There's a beautiful chant that says, Brahmanandam Shivam Shantam Premarupam Niranjanam Yogisham Adbhutam Nityam Akandadvaita Lakshinam Vijnanam Trigunatitam Turyaveda Samgitam Subodham Shardam Chaiva Vivekashashi Bhushanam. That lists all 16 of Sri Ramakrishna's wonderful direct disciples. They were all monastic leaning. So they were wandering about and without any place to settle, which is what monks do. Many of them, unless they do have a monastery in which they can gather around and meditate and serve. Those are the two aspects of the Ramakrishna mission and Mat, to meditate and realize the self, and then to serve. Atmano moksharta jagaditaya cha is the beautiful saying that Sri Ramakrishna made up, the slogan or motto for the Ramakrishna order. And that is for the realization of the self and the good of the world. You might want to put it that way. So it's a good order to put it in. First realize the self and then serve. And then your work will be free of mistakes and so forth. But back to my story, the monks were wondering, young boys, most of them. And so Holy Mother prayed to the Divine Mother of the Universe and said, please provide some place where they can gather and settle and be sustained, and their health can be maintained. And the great intention of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa to be of service and to the world and help the suffering can be carried off that way, and it won't just sort of end up to be a few souls that wandered around the world and helped a few others and then passed from the scene, but it became an order then. So that's sort of what I'm getting to here is that the monks are going to need a place to consume food. They won't have to go out and beg. That's one phase of monasticism, and it's a very good one, and you wouldn't want to take that away from a monastic order. It's a way in which has been traditional in India for time out of mind. But on the other hand, when you have a great work to do and service to render to suffering and striving souls, then you can gather together in an institution like that, and then you won't have to go out and spend your time searching for food just for yourself, but you can actually begin to organize. Organization is one of the great things of religion. Also can be one of its downfalls, as we know, but as long as the Dharma is kept, the teachings are kept prevalent, then it's one of the great things of religious institutions. So in that way, and toward this question, it's a matter of practicality then. There's the faith and the renunciation that you're mentioning here in your question, but then there's also the mode in which you have to understand it. That means that you're going to have to hold two ideals in a sense. You're going to have to realize that God does provide everything for, we would say Divine Mother provides everything for her children. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the mother bird, the monk may renounce everything, but the mother bird has to provide for her chicks. See, so in that way, it's two different modes that you're looking at there. One is the ideal which you hold in your mind, and the other is the way in which you're going to sustain that ideal. That is the practical side of things. So there's the ideal, and then there's the practical. So you would hold in your mind then the fact that God provides, Mother provides for you and for everyone, but then you can't just sit around and expect her to provide everything. You might waste away, and your children might waste away, because you're not out being responsible and and providing for. So you have then two different modes. You have the monk and the householder, the monastic and the householder, and each one of them, if they're holding a similar ideal here, that is basically that God provides, Mother provides, and always will, and that's an ideal you hold. It's a place that you hang your hat inside, as it were. You just take that as the foundation for your existence that will reduce all fear to nothing. And so hopes and fears and broodings and so forth will go away because of that ideal you've taken in your mind. Then you have to go about proving that to yourself and being of service to others. So really you have the sort of meditation yoga on one hand, and then you have the service yoga on the other hand. That is Dhyan yoga and karma yoga. And of course, then when you move out and begin to provide for either yourself or your family, then you will have this attitude, as the question says here, that everything is already done, everything is already provided for, and all you need to do is go out and find it. See, so it's a way in which these two ideals can get integrated, and therefore become a way of life which is dharmic. Abhyudaya and nishrayasha, they call it. Nishrayas means the renunciation mode or attitude, and abhyudaya means material well-being for all beings. So those are the two ancient pillars of Indian life. And that wasn't just for the monastic, it was mainly for the householder, that you have to have this ideal of ultimately everything is to be renounced, because you are not any of this external, and you're not even the internal either. You're not the external nature, and you're not the mind internally either. You're the soul, or the Atman, or the Buddha nature, the essence of those two, inner and outer. So that's how you fuse the internal and the external into one thing, which is transcendent. Third world, first world, second world, and the third world. Just what happens to you like in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. In deep sleep you go to a third world where there's no form. So if your consciousness graduates with you when you make that transition, then you go into a formless state consciously, and you see everything in seed form in deep sleep. All the seeds are there, but they haven't sprouted yet. Sort of idea. So in that way, that's that idea of conjunction again, or bringing together, realizing the natural synthesis of everything. It would be the same in relation to this question, is that's the natural state of everything is that the universe will provide. If you put it just on the level of the physical, even, the universe will provide. But doesn't mean that you don't get out and till the universe and forage, as it were, find the food that is there in the universe so that you can make it accessible to people. Maybe people who aren't yet able to get out and forage for themselves, like children and so forth. So that's abhyudaya, the material well-being for everyone. Make sure everyone has that foundation of food upon which you can then gather the strength from food in order to be able to arrive at that station of absolute renunciation, nishrayas. So that's a way of explaining this. The dharmic householder then is going to have to provide, like the mother bird, and the monastic will also have to wait patiently and maybe even go begging for the food. So that's an act that has to do to keep the body alive, to keep the body sustained with enough good energy so that it can live long enough to realize the soul, realize the Atman, the self in all beings, as we were just chanting. So again, to conclude about that, keep the ideal that all is provided, that Mother will provide for all, and that's a good ideal to hold. But then you must act as well for the highest good of all beings, abhyudaya, highest well-being for all goods and all beings, and for yourself too. And that's how to live on, hold two ideals, as you might say, both the ideal of absolute renunciation and also the ideal of service to God and mankind, as I was mentioning, is that beautiful motto of the Ramakrishna order. There's an addendum to this question. Related to this question, the same questioner asks, how can such an attitude of the householder be taken up without bringing God down to the level of nature and beginning to believe that God is an actor or a doer, an agent? That is, again, a matter of holding Dharma, holding the highest truth. You don't pull God down to the world. You take the world inward and upward, as it were, to God, to divine reality. Divine reality needs to be left in its pure state. It's the one thing, to quote Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that has not been defiled by the tongue of man. And that is this divine reality. It cannot be spoken, so it can't be defiled in any way. Defiled means not only grossly, but even compromised subtly. It remains non-dual, pure and perfect and changeless at all times. So in order to approach that, you're going to have to raise yourself up. You see, you make the mind non-dual, or make thine eye single, and then realize Brahman, or Allah, or Almighty Father, as you would call it, at the deepest and highest level. Hiran Maye Pare Koshe Virajan Brahmanishkalam Tachu Brahm Jyotisham Jyoti. Yadatma Viddo Vidduhu means highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, there shines Brahman. So those words describe the non-dual state of divine reality. So you must raise yourself to that. Don't idealize the real, realize the ideal, is how our teacher used to put it, Swami Asheshanandaji Maharaj. Or Swami Vivekananda would say, don't try and drag Brahman down to the world, that is, to your comfort zones here and so forth. Rather, take yourself and raise yourself up to Brahman. Because Brahman cannot be compromised in any way, cannot be made a form, or cannot be given a name. We think of it with name and form only as a concession for our own limitations here on the physical level. And so we can understand, then we think of God with name and form, and describe God as being in time and space like we are, but that's not the case. You always have to keep it non-dual, pure and perfect as it is, undefiled, as Sri Ramakrishna said. Then that's your ideal again, and you hold that, and you don't compromise it at all. Swami Vivekananda always used to say things like, you may have to compromise with the world sometimes, but never compromise with the truth. So you always have to keep that sacrosanct. And if when the world comes into the periphery of your existence in life, then you may have to make certain concessions and compromises in order to live in it and allow yourself time for realization of the highest truth. But you should know that the highest truth exists at all times, and it's just waiting for you to uncover, as in a sort of revelation type of way. That's what revelation is good for. So, without believing God to be an actor, see, the Sri Ramakrishna used to say that he would say that that's a very, very rare and profound state of awareness that proclaims God to be non-doer or non-actor. Most people cannot say that, that I'm a non-doer, I'm a non-actor, because they have to act and they have to perform their duties and their responsibilities and so forth. So the non-dual state of mind isn't reached through action. Its inaction is incumbent upon the soul. You have to go into a state of inaction in order to realize the formless Brahman. Sure, action and inaction as a duality will fuse together. That's a conjunction. That's something that you'll have to do. But in order to do that, you're going to have to put action aside and become actionless, like, say, Lord Buddha did under the bo tree for so many days, or Muhammad on the mountain, or Christ in the wilderness. You have to become inactive for a certain period of time in order to realize the inactive nature of divine reality. That's that non-dual state. So it's a very high state then, Sri Ramakrishna says, that proclaims God is a non-doer, or I am a non-doer. That's a very rare person, such as the Paramahamsa, could proclaim that with any realization behind it. He loved that song, Shakale Tomari Icha, in Bengali, that says, O Mother, all happens by thy own sweet will. Surely you are the self-willed one. All work is done by thee, others only call it their own. You trap the powerful elephant in the mire and cause the lame man to climb the highest mountain. On some you hurl into the world of suffering, others you lift into the highest reality. I am the chariot, you are the charioteer. I am the house, you are the indweller. I am the sword, you are its wielder. I exist as you exist through me. I act as you act through me. I think as you think through me. So that song by Raj Chandra, Sri Ramakrishna used to love to hear that sung by Naran, that is Swami Vivekananda, and other beings, musicians that would come to the Kali temple, and would love to hear that sung, and it would put him in a very high state. And he said that it described very much that idea that all action is done by the divine, and gets all that work. She gets all that work done through her mediums, through people, and they all think the work belongs to them, but she's actually behind it all. So it has to be described a little bit philosophically that God is a non-doer. It doesn't actually get involved in the realm of work, but from a witness standpoint looks on as action is done through the different mediums. It's sort of like fire and its power to burn, those kinds of ideas. There's something that's transcendent, and then something that's relative, absolute and relative. And the relative operates by the presence of the absolute. Fire is there, so the burning power happens, you see. Take the fire away, the burning power wouldn't happen. So take Brahman away, there would be no actors, no stage. All of that would disappear. So that's the inactive agent, we call it, or the unstruck sound of the word, or the unseen seer. Those are sort of seemingly contradictory phrases, words we put together to try and communicate the incommunicable, as that Brahman is beyond action, beyond thought, beyond matter. And we leave it there, as we were just saying, as pure and perfect as it is. But its presence causes everything else to vibrate. It's not a vibration. It's not a source for anything. Sometimes they call Brahman a source, but it can't be a source of anything. it's an unsourced source. You see, you'd have to go in that direction with it. And samadhi proves that. If you go into a higher state of awareness, then the world goes away. The senses shut down. The mind turns off. The intellect goes into non-vibratory state. There's no more thought. What about that? What happens there? Like deep sleep, which is not samadhi yet, but it's still a good example. It's sort of like a clue God left us. You see, in our states of awareness, yes, you have waking, you have dreaming, you're playing with objects, you're playing with names and forms. Have a good time, go on playing. But what about that deep sleep state that happens to you every once in a while, wherein you get all your rest, all your reflection, all your relief, where there is no name, form, time, space, or causality present in you. You left it behind. What about that? Sort of like a clue. Deep sleep is a clue towards higher samadhi. It's a portal into which the temporarily embodied soul can leave the confines of Maya, name, form, time, space, and causation. Leave the confines of Maya and begin to see itself as in its true form, its true original form, as light, boundless light, if you want to put it that way, or the unstruck sound. That's why those things become apparent to the soul in deep sleep or in samadhi. They go into light and they dissolve there, like a hailstone falling in an ocean, Shankara says, or they absorb themselves completely in the sound. And when they wake up, the sound and the light goes away, because they've left that realm of non-duality and they've come to this realm of varieties, by chitra, varieties. So all of that is very apropos to describing the inactive nature of divine reality. That's why we practice meditation then, to become the inactive actor. See, we transcend all acts and we stop our breath and we shut down our senses and we try and keep our mind from thinking or vibrating, or it happens naturally, that's better. And then we just sit in that state of oneness, and bliss all of a sudden makes itself known to us. Where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. So you're going to have to get some knowledge about all of this, states of awareness, and then you're going to experience the truth of them, and then bliss will be the result. It's another conjunction, you see. Put truth together with knowledge, or knowledge together with truth, and the conjunction is bliss. So that is an answer to this addendum to this question. How can such an attitude of the householder be taken up without bringing God down to the level of nature? We should not bring God down to the level of nature. That's the first thing we say as non-dualists or Advaitas, because it's not possible to, so you shouldn't attempt it. Don't try and drag God down to matter. Rather, try and spiritualize matter and take that up to God, is how Vivekananda would express that. So you can't make divine reality into a form, because we know forms are empty and forms are appearances. When you look at them, even through quantum physics, you see them as just vibrating particles which are changing at a billionth of a second. So rather you should look at everything and make it Brahman. Take matter and divinize it, deify it. That's how the tantric way would put it. And then you can render it back to its source, which is formless. You cannot produce an unproduced thing, Gaudapada says in his Karika, non-dual reality. You cannot produce an unproduced thing, and all of this is unproduced. All of this is non-originated. So if you bring it into form, then you've made an error, as it were. You've made something that's essentially formless into a form. Why did you do that? To play with it a little while, fine, then let it go. Girls outgrow dolls. and they get husbands. That's how Sri Ramakrishna put it. So you outgrow, as a soul, you outgrow nature, and you get God, you see, as your husband, as your divine beloved, and you're not satisfied with playthings anymore. You see, you have the experience of divine reality, oneness, Advaita, yourself, and then you're satisfied for all times. That's higher wisdom, satisfies you for all times. Lower knowledge will only satisfy you for a little while. That's another paraphrase of Vivekananda's. So then do not draw God down to the level of nature. Your attitude should be that you will leave God in its pure and perfect state at all times, and then you will raise yourself to it. And then, therefore, you won't fall into the misconception that God is a form or a name or an act or a vibration, even a healing vibration, like a difference between a negative thought and a good thought or a mixed thought. None of those. No matter what duality or what triputi you might look into to try and satisfy or solve problems and questions, that's all happening at the level of mind and relativity. When you step into the realm of non-duality, all of that disappears. There are no more dualities, there are no more problems, there are no more solutions. It's all divine reality in its homogeneous state, and you are it, that thou art. That has to be experienced then. So you cannot have that experience if you compromise like that, or if you make the mistakes of not keeping Brahman pure and perfect, and trying to bring God down into the world. You have to then hold that idea we were just talking about in the first question, that all of this is, your attitude should be that all of this is provided for. And really, if you look into it, you'd find that the mind has been the one that's provided, has been the provider. The mind, a collective mind, a cosmic mind of the Trinity, and all of these individual minds have really produced nature. Nature has come out of the mind. And so, therefore, mind and nature together are providing all of the worlds. And whatever desires beings have for the worlds are being satisfied inside of that provision. As divine reality stands behind and witnesses and just watches. It's good, because then when you're through playing in the worlds of name and form, in the playground of the Lord, see, then you have a place to go. See, school is over, recess is over, playtime is over, and now you just return to your pure and natural state again. And that's peace of mind, and that's non-dual samadhi. That's I and my Father are one. And so that's good, that's beyond good. From good to best, from good to better to best, as Vivekananda used to say. So that has been a two-part question that we've taken some time, and now we have just in time, we have a question that's been written in. How does nature come out of the mind? When Mahat and Manas come out of Prakriti? Well, you're talking about Prakriti as having two sides. One is formless, and one is with form. That is, you have the transcendent Prakriti, which is seed form, as we were saying. And then you have, that's the bulk of the iceberg. And then you have the tip of the iceberg, where some of that gets taken out of the mind and solidified. So to answer the first part, how does nature come out of the mind? In sets of fives. That's the pancha karana, fivefold process that is there, from the fivefold mind down to the with the help of the 5 pranas, then you have these 5 subtle senses and 5 subtle elements, and then 5 gross elements and 5 gross senses. That's sometimes known as the 24 cosmic principles, or add Mahat with that, and then you would get 25. So Prakriti then and Purusha, are soul and nature, are the sort of the foundation of that. That's at least the Samkhya way of putting it. Samkhya Yoga, ancient times, by Lord Kapila. So all of this then comes out of the mind via vibration by sets of 5s, trickling down like that, trickling out, you might say, from the causal state to the subtle state to the gross state. That's called the 3 worlds. And this process and its various conjunctions, as we were talking about, has been viewed by the seers in deep samadhi and deep meditation, and then they've come out of those meditations and shown and described in various scriptures and testaments, like the Upanishads and the Panchadasi and Bhagavad Gita with Sri Krishna, how this all marches out. Like Krishna says, I have my 3 modes. I have unmanifested Prakriti and I have Prakriti, but I also have my supremely unmanifested self. So the formless reality is beyond unmanifested Prakriti and manifested Prakriti. That's the outer and inner worlds. But then you have this transcendent world that he's talking about, which is his true self. Samkhya would call it the Purusha, and we could call it the Atman, or be called Buddha nature or divine reality. And that's right in accordance with what we were saying with the ideal that you have to keep in these 2 earlier questions that were just answered. Is keep that ideal of the formless divine reality as being unchangeable. And then after that, you can, with that as your foundation, you can look into the cosmology of things, where things originate from. If you look at the utpatti, they call it in Sanskrit, the state of origins, as they become, as you involve and you begin to meditate on these various alambanas, or foundations for meditation, like earth, air, fire, water, and ether, and touching, tasting, hearing, smelling, and seeing, you begin to look at all of these and in their conjunctions, and then you remind yourself of how you and collective humanity all found its way out into nature. It provided a platform like an architect and a bunch of carpenters would build a stage for a dance performance. So all of these individual minds and collective minds of the humans and ancestors and gods and goddesses and celestials all provided the stage, you see, and then consciousness came back out and inhabited it. That's called Vishishtadvaita, the qualified non-dual way of explaining it, which is one of the best ways of explaining it, because you really can't explain it from the Advaitic standpoint. In the Advaitic standpoint, all of that is gone. See, there's only one reality, one ocean, and if it breaks into waves, then you're talking about a qualified matter. But the ocean at its depths never breaks into waves, so Advaita always stays at the center in the depths. And if it comes out at all to talk about the waves, it's Maya. You see, that's just the appearance of things. Or as the ancient rishi said, it's the overflow of the bliss of Brahman. The bliss of Brahman is in that deep peace of formless, waveless, vrittyless, vibrationless bliss, reality. And if it does break into waves, then that's just the overflow of the bliss of Brahman. It doesn't mean that you have to believe in two-ness. One came from the other. So in the same way, then, nature came out of the mind. And as it does, then you shouldn't fall into believing in varieties, differences, separations, If you keep your Advaitic or non-dual standpoint, then all of this can be the play of the waves on the ocean, and the ocean doesn't change. But if you get obsessed with the surface of the ocean, then you get tossed about by its waves, and then you forget the deep peace that's there at the foundation. So that would be one of the great realizations upon which you would answer a question like that. Now, there's one more question here that we can take that came in from Europe. When the seers divide up reality in so many categories, are these just a very refined and sophisticated tool for the mind to cope with reality? Or do they also exist apart from the mind that sees these categories? Do we impose these categories on reality to help us become clear and give us a map? Or are these categories intrinsic to nature? So, when the seers divide up reality in so many categories, are these just a refined and sophisticated tool for the mind to cope with reality? Yeah, I would have to talk with the person who sent this question is to define words here and make sure I understand where he's coming from. But from what I understand from the question here is that the divided up categories would be what we were just talking about. Nature, he mentions that at the end. These categories, are these categories intrinsic to nature? And that's where we would say yes, nature or Prakriti has produced, is the foundation for all of these productions. See, but the soul is the witness of all of these. So, and the mind is the medium. There's your samhita. There's your conjunction. Brahman, worlds, and mind as the joining point. So, in that way, then, it's not so much really to cope with reality as to cope with relativity that we make these divisions. If you know reality, then of course there's no coping necessary. You are that reality, and you're always living in a state of non-dual existence, called samadhi or satori. In fact, when I first read this question, I thought maybe the questioner was talking about the different samadhis, because there are non-dual samadhi, and then there's a host of conditioned or seated samadhis. They call them nirbija samadhi. And but when I examine it more, I see that it has more to do with the categories of nature, the sets of fives we were talking about, and how they trickle down and turn into solid objects. As Holy Mother used to say, the objects are just mind made concretized, or thought solidified. So that's a kind of a hint that we could look into objects and take them back to their source. We would find that they're coming out of the intelligence of the mind. The mind has solidified them. Nature couldn't do this by itself, in other words. There has to be a soul component or an intelligent component that's behind as the backdrop of nature. And the magnificent varieties of this universe alone would suggest that or point to that to any deep thinker. But even more apparent then, if you leave in your meditation, for instance, you leave this realm, physical realm, and the realm of the five senses, and you start contemplating the other sets of fives, like your five senses in your dream tonight, your subtle senses and your dream elements, then you would find even more efficacy and more proof that there are these subtle lokas or realms, atmospheres, akasha. There are different words for it in Sanskrit that we don't have in English. So since we don't have these words in English, we don't contemplate in that direction. But when you find these words in Sanskrit, then you begin to know that some of the inner principles have been named. And basically that's a good, valid way of answering these questions. If you name a thing, and it does have a name, obviously, then you'll be able to contemplate it. If you don't have a name or a form present, then it would be very difficult to contemplate it. So by sets of fives in your inner contemplation, you move back in and you contemplate each one of these things in turns. The universe, the self, progeny, learning. Those are like some of the main facets of samhitas are called. That you would be looking for posterior, anterior, joining, and result in all of in everything that you contemplate inside of you. And then you could find how they all originate out of each other. How one set of five preserves and enacts, enables the next set of fives. And so then you just turn it and move it back inside, like putting a Russian doll inside of the next Russian doll, and then inside of the next Russian doll, so you have 5 Russian dolls, you see. So this, probably not a coincidence that there are 5 Russian dolls too. This 5 is an important number in this quintuplication process. So that's a way in which you would cope with relativity, I would say, rather than cope with reality. You can cope with relativity, but then you're going to realize reality after you've set everything clear in how this world manifested out of nature, out of the mind, how everything came about in a state of Shrishti, Sthiti, and Laya. How cycles are moving from projection to sustenance to withdrawal, constantly like that, like your 24-hour waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. All of that then becomes a grand conjunction, a maha samhita in you, and you know how things join, how they have their relations, what the result of these relations are, and you can also take them apart in your own meditation to return to a non-dual state of awareness. For that's from which you came. See? So that is reality that is, and then relativity as it gets coped with. So I would have to modify the question here, the wording of the question a little bit in order to explain that. So yes, they are categories which help us become clear and give us a map, is how the questioner says it here. These categories are intrinsic to nature, yes, and these categories do provide a map for us, if you want to put it that way, to create a strategy by which we can move through the various worlds. Lokas, they're called, the kingdoms of heaven within you, or my Father's mansion has many chambers. Those cryptic statements are more than just, infer more than just external worlds, like houses with rooms in them, but that the whole thing is one big mansion inside of you, kingdom of heaven within you, and that you go through different doorways into different chambers, different vibrational spheres. Spandas, the Shaivites call them, Lokas, the Vedas call them, Akasha, as Sanskrit names it. These, you move through these in dream, and after death you also move through these. So the ideal really is to awaken spiritually and begin to move through these in your meditation while you're in the physical body. Because if you can do it here in the physical body, you can do it anywhere. Because here's where the most limitation is. The doors are closed. As you can see by most of humanity, the doors are closed. There's only one world, and and that's not a good thing. It's not a good kind of oneness I just mentioned. There's only this one world, and it's external, and it's born in matter, lives in matter, dies as matter dies, and there's no soul to it, and the mind is left out of the quotient. It's just body and brain. That's closed doors to me, see. But all the seers and saints and the avatars and the great souls come back again and again to tell you, knock and it shall be opened, ask and it shall be answered. So you yourself have to do the knocking and the moving, see, inside to explore these divine realms so that you can cope with relativity that has come about by your own mental process, mind and nature together, you see. Everything that vibrates. But you want to find yourself back to the Word, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So if you can move back in density of vibration to subtler vibrations, to causal vibrations, to where vibrations disappear, that's the Word, and it's with God. And then it's going to be very well nigh impossible for you not to see God if you arrive at the Word, the station of the Word. It's with God, and then it is God. That is, it was God. So in that way, you move through these three worlds. The Word manifested, the Word unmanifested, and the Word that is one with divine reality. And you can put it in many different ways, the way Samkhya puts it, the way Tantra puts it, the way Yoga puts it, the way Vedanta describes it, and Buddhism and so forth. But if you look at them all sort of next to each other, then you'll see that they're all proclaiming the same essence, but by going by different wordage and different avenues. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti, as the Rig Veda says. In the first book, and there's so many verses in the Rig Veda, and so many books to it, but they're buried inside of the first book. Is one of the later verses is that Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one. Seers call it by different names, and that's one of the earliest of all universal statements that have been proclaimed by the great seers called rishis in India. So a very good question there. It opens up a lot to discuss. Our limited time here in this format this morning has just expired, or is about to expire. So we will leave it with those 3 or 4 questions and return next Sunday, I believe, for a final satsang before our forthcoming journey to the SRV associations in San Francisco and Portland, Oregon. So there'll be one more live streaming class this afternoon, and then one more satsang and one more live streaming class next Sunday, and before our journey away to the West Coast. And we'll be live streaming from there too. So all of you can continue to tune in, as they say, and use this vehicle of live streaming to stream, to get onto a stream of consciousness, conscious particles, jnana matras, that are streaming constantly from the source and providing all of this from the Word down to mind, down to nature, providing it all for the highest good of all living beings, and may that highest good come unto all of us at all times, and healing, well-being, and prosperity also abide among us. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya Mrityur Ma Mritam Gamaya Abhirabi Vira Mayeti Ruduryache Dakshinam Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.
Kanyan Yogesh